couple things we hear of why people don't want to donate things is first is that they don't think their stuff is significant. Well, I can tell you maybe it's not, but it very well could be. A lot of historical societies are looking for things to put in their collections, you know, photographs, letters. Some people think that their collections aren't worth much. Unfortunately, this has to do with things like the Antiques Roadshow and a new thing now called Pawn Stars. That's another show now, and everything has to have value now. And I can tell you that the things at the State Archives, they do have value. I don't know if they have monetary value, but I can tell you they have historical value. And the kind of work that we do is going around and getting collections that have historic value for our mission and fit into our collection policy and have us do what we're trying to do for the public. Some people think that history isn't important or there's enough stuff on the topic already. I had a woman come in one day. She said, we were talking about the Pier Flood, Pier Flood in 1952, and I was just saying how we have some letters and a lot of postcards, a ton of postcards, and she said, oh, you know, I have some stuff and you probably wouldn't want it. And I said, oh, well, what is it? And her mother had basically kept a diary day to day during the flood, saying what's going on down to the water level as it was coming up towards the house. And I'm like, yeah, this is something we want, you know. So don't think that these historical societies and museums and other places don't want your stuff, because they do find interest in it. It can be significant. Some people have a fear if things will get used or won't. At the archives, we like having people, researchers, genealogists, use stuff. So that's always good. And the worst thing to think is that you'll do it later, because sometimes that doesn't happen and it's too late. So the reason why you should donate stuff is sometimes you'll have, a lot of times there'll be a loss of provenance. That's the history behind it, like those World War II letters. The wife had kept them. They were from her husband. She had saved them. She had actually kept them in the fridge. And the gal who donated figured she put them in the fridge because she must have read somewhere that the fridge is the last thing to go if there's ever a fire. So throw it in the fridge and that way it'll be safe. But she, you know, the neighbor knew the letters were in there, and the gal would always tell her about them, and, you know, the gal passed away, and the kids were just, they were going to chuck them. But she saved them and brought them up to the archives. So your wishes might not be known, your wishes might not be followed. That's always important to let someone know. Stuff gets thrown away. There's a lot of history in landfills, unfortunately. So always keep that in mind. And sometimes collections are always best to be kept together. And if things get dispersed, you're going to run into part of a collection here, part is there. And it doesn't do history any good if your stuff is in your bedroom. So it's always good to have it somewhere where it's accessible, where people can look at it. So I'm going to talk about paper here. This first part is going to kind of cover kind of any collection you have, but some things to keep in mind with your family stuff at home. First, do no harm. Don't do anything that's going to make your letters or photographs worse. Don't make it worse. Rule of reversibility: if you do something to it, make sure it can be undone. Again, you don't want to do something like cutting a photograph out of just one person or cutting the signature out of a letter. You know, you can't undo that. Preservation versus conservation. This is important when I come and talk with groups like this and other historical societies, because preservation is what I do. We get stuff, we keep it so we don't get worse. What I don't do is conservation. I don't fix stuff. I'm not in the business of fixing stuff. I'm in the business of preserving things so they don't get worse. So don't think if you have letters or a map and it's ripped at home that you have to do all kinds of treatments on it. You have to ship it out somewhere to have all kinds of hundreds if not thousands of dollars of conservation work done. Just preserve it. Preserve it.
So when you're caring for, well, ceramics, metal, glass, wood, stone, bone, and plastics, and that list can keep going for miles, because there's so many different types of materials that museum objects are made out of, or it's personal collections, but you need to keep it somewhat concise. There's a number of things to consider. First of all, what's your purpose? Are you going to put it on display? Are you going to just store it, or are you going to use it? And those really plan to how long your artifacts are going to last, especially if it's on display. Actually, especially if you're going to use it, because it won't last that long if it's going to be used as a tool or whatnot. If it's on display, it's going to be suffering from a lot more environmental conditions, kind of like what Matthew touched on, and I'll touch on too. Also, keep in mind what kind of materials your objects are made out of. Many times, objects are going to be made out of multiple materials, and that poses their own risk. So, when there are multiple materials present, things you want to keep in mind are how they'll react with one another. The best example of this is if you have any old military uniforms or any old suits with the brass buttons and matching up against the wool. The brass and the wool really don't like to get along, and the brass usually wins. So it leaves a nice brown mark. And then the brass also turns green, and that's ugly. One material requires special care, such as like if for example, you have a 1880 Plains War Club that has a stone and then wood and then a feather attached to it. Well, the stone and the wood are going to be fine for the most part, but the feather, it's going to lose a battle if that thing shifts around at all. And a very important thing to keep in mind too is whether your materials were treated with anything originally or by some previous owner, or during a conservation or preservation treatment. And the things that jump out to me is, was it treated with arsenic, or was it treated with any of the earlier century chemicals, or even some things have been coated with radioactive paint. So you don't really want to be handling